People have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions?
Yeah.
Like you said, it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say in The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. But the problem with her is that she went full racist. She injected skin color into a fairly generic behavior seen in all spouses, regardless of skin color. People marry, they listen to each other, they have something in common with them, they share their political views. She just didn't want to upset her husband by saying her husband makes her do everything, and then she'd have to accuse him of being a racist. Because if he told her that this is what white women do, then he's a racist. You see?
If you thought daytime TV was safe, think again. This was a takedown with no commercial breaks. And what do you get when Greg Gutfeld and Bill Maher tag team roast The View? It's a verbal demolition so brutal that even Whoopi's wig tried to tap out. Instead of just throwing shade, these two launched a full eclipse, with one calling out the hypocrisy and the other setting it on fire with sarcasm.
By the way, out there, that hat that you keep wearing, that red hat that says "Make America Great Again," that tells people that you go along with this. So you might as well just put a swastika on the hat.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Because we see it anyway.
I'm not going to defend Donald Trump ever, but I would never say that we should put the swastika on the cap, because I think you can hate Donald Trump. You can't hate everybody who likes him. It's half the country. I don't want to live in that country. I don't want to live in the country where I hate half the country, and I don't hate half the
How
country.
do you disagree?
It's a daytime drama masquerading as a talk show, with a never-ending carousal of crosstalk, confusion, and caffeine-fueled clapbacks. If you were to put a Nobel Prize winner on that panel, they would be crying into a mug 5 minutes later, wondering why truth has suddenly turned into a hostile guest. But hold on to your seat, because two uninvited critics just entered the studio, Greg Gutfeld and Bill Maher. Evidence that unexpected allies can come together in times of chaos.
Sausage maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City.
When both of them decide it's time to roast The View, you know we're in for something special, like watching sharks agree the boat is sinking and then biting it for fun. Greg Gutfeld, the Fox News jester, has made a side gig out of dragging The View like it owes him money. It's almost a ritual. One is a right-wing sadist who acts like he drinks espresso shots laced with sarcasm, and the other is a liberal atheist who believes political correctness is the real pandemic.
Joy Behar calls her a 10. I mean, how dare she objectify a woman with a sexist rating system, but it's such a typical thing from a 1.5.
Well said.
The panel says something ridiculous. When Greg hears it, he changes the weather patterns and becomes quite vocal. The most vulnerable ego fest on daytime television is WWE, which has the problem of presenting itself as a debate but actually consisting of 5 people yelling at each other while feigning to be the voice of reason. Greg jokingly made the remark that watching The View is similar to watching a group project in which nobody done the reading, but everyone is certain they're correct. The tendency of Joy Behar to revise history in the middle of sentences Whoopi's development as the most perplexed philosopher in the world, and Sunny Hostin's never-ending game of "I'm right because I said so."
Behar gets racism after all. She's been black on Halloween. Yeah. But Joy wasn't there on the show. Apparently Mondays are her days off when she feeds in the pasture. But that is convenient, right? It's like one of my aunts dies every time Brand Kilmeade wants to hang out. Maybe Joy needs a full day to read her hate mail, and that's just from the rest of the cast.
Greg claims that The View isn't a conversation show, but rather a therapy session where the guests are only there for target practice, and the therapist frequently leaves. Beneath the humor and vicious onliners, Gutfeld's core argument is that the viewpoint has devolved into a self-congratulatory circle in which anyone who holds a different opinion is either yelled down or reframed as a danger to democracy. You're called to repentance, not invited to have a conversation. If you can get past the eye rolls, side whispers, and the dramatic sighs, you might even get a half sentence without interruption. Let's also talk about how Greg criticizes their supposedly inclusive environment, which is like an Arctic blizzard. A conservative voice enters the set, and all of a sudden, it's less about talking and more about trapping and destroying. Gutfeld refers to it as such. Broadway performance activism with louder eyebrows and poorer lighting. And don't assume that he spares the production. As said by Greg, but the real cherry on top is Gutfeld's theory that The View exists in a completely different universe where facts are filtered through emotional mood rings and logic is measured in decibels. For him, watching The View is like reading a Twitter thread that accidentally turned into a panel show. And he's not wrong. The real host of The View isn't Joy or Whoopi. It's the teleprompter guy hoping for commercial breaks before another misinformation monologue goes viral.
Obviously, just the part that you said. Did I watch a whole episode of The View?
No woman can do that unless you're stupid. But
I have a job.
Here's the thing. How can they call themselves progressives when they keep saying that nothing has progressed? Then it's on them.
Right. I just wish I could have, what I would have watched if I could, would have been Joy Behar watching that.
Yes.
And being like, I totally made the right call. It was not an accident that they had him there on her day off.
Yes.
When she was, presented herself as the, expert on systemic racism as a white lady.
Well, she had that one Halloween where she went to Diana Ross and she felt she was treated differently.
Bill Maher, the man who has almost constructed a mansion on Mount Contrarian and hosts cocktail parties with truth bombs, appears just when you think the roast has reached its boiling point. If the sniper pointing out the hypocrisy from a distance is Gutfeld, Maher, the demolition specialist, enters the building smiling and carrying a detonator. When even Bill Maher begins disparaging the viewpoint, you can tell they've gone too far for solace. Maher's primary grievance is The View's allergic reaction to subtleties. He has always been the type of liberal who unnerves other liberals by supporting free speech and calling nonsense what it is, regardless of the party selling it. Maher noted that the perspective views disagreement as a danger rather than a chance. Ma claims that if you say something even slightly out of line with the group, you're immediately labeled troublesome, misogynistic, or his personal favorite, unenlightened. It's a diagnosis. They will prescribe a public apology and a Twitter cancellation if you talk freely. He has ripped into their feigned indignation, their fixation on moral superiority, and their remarkable capacity to transform any subject, no matter how trivial, into a full-blown tantrum.
Well, I had a different question, but it struck me that in the first segment you used the term woke, and you said that woke is what was sort of ruining everything. And I know that you're.
No, I didn't say ruining everything. I said that's why Trump could get reelected.
That's why Trump could get reelected. So, the term woke has been, in my view, co-opted by the right and weaponized and bastardized. And so I was surprised to hear you use the term because historically, as you know, because I think you're quite brilliant, that woke is a word used by the Black community to note that we must be aware of social injustices.
But words
and
migrate.
So why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, and originally that was absolutely
If Gutfeld accuses the hosts of manipulating diversity of thought, Maher goes beyond the surface and mocks how they quote unfinished articles, use hashtags in place of sentences, and treat emotional volume as a stand-in for actual evidence. He compares watching The Viewpoint, he argues, is to watching a fire drill where everyone insists the smoke is your fault. With a sneer and a grimace, Ma accuses them of completely pretending to be intellectually curious. His takedowns include phrases like, "He's just upset the bar has gone this low." Maher begins to wonder if a show is actually entertainment or just tribal cosplay with coffee mugs when it becomes so predictable that you can predict their reactions before they speak. And here's the worst part. The View has become an unintentional comedy, except the jokes aren't funny and the punchlines think they're profits. The statement reads, Gutfeld and Maher, two men who wouldn't agree on the color of the sky if you'd given them paint samples, somehow ended up on the same page. According to both men, the show is more of a political performance art piece than a round, with every problem being presented as the end of the world and every remedy being a group hug with pointed elbows.
about what we go over because I got so many texts this week because she attacked me the week
Yeah,
before.
sure.
So everybody was like, "Oh, Bill, I get you're enjoying the karma." First of all, I'm going to talk about this at the end of my show next week, teaser. But there is no fucking thing as karma. Okay, get over that. Attacks me on a regular basis. She says stupid shit on a regular basis. It just happened to coincide.
They both believe that the show discourages independent thought, that viewers are taught to applaud like it's a wrestling match, and most hilariously, that The View has turned into the one place where voicing dissent is riskier than wearing makeup. Gutfeld refers to it as ideological theatre. Maher says, it's a culty breakfast with commercial interruptions. The View hosts are both right, and you could almost see the steam rising off their mugs when these clips went viral. The few times they attempted to clap back, it was the verbal equivalent of trying to put out a grease fire with glitter defensive vague, and somehow they missed the whole point. However, viewers from both political camps saw something uncommon across the aisle. Agreement, and not just agreement. People laughed because the criticisms were true, because The View, in all its preachy self-congratulatory glory, had finally become the thing it most detests. The fallout was as predictable as it was awkward.
I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bill Maher, who has been the standard bearer for liberalism and in many ways leftism until the woke went bananas in this last decade, but for decades, that's what this guy has represented in America. I want you to note the tone they all talk with him. I want you to look at Sonny Hostin's body language and the way they look at him and everything else. Just because he is a lefty who hasn't gone completely bananas, here they are.
It was as if someone had dropped a mirror on the table and no one wanted to investigate it. The irony of all ironies is that the show that purports to support difficult conversations couldn't handle two outsiders doing just that. Suddenly, the show stopped discussing the criticisms, offered no considerate responses or acknowledgement, just tight smiles, and moved on as if they hadn't just been served a 5-course roast with a side of spicy truth. Instead of dropping bombs, Feld and Maher used facts, sarcasm, and satire. The View retaliated by hiding under the table and hoping that the audience wouldn't notice. But they did, because when a liberal comedian and a Fox host collaborate to undermine your credibility, it's not a hit show, rather it's an intervention, a very public, hilarious intervention. And let's not forget the bigger picture. This wasn't just about prolonging a show. It was about exposing what happens when a platform stops listening and starts preaching, when it exchanges curiosity for clicks and forgets that the disagreement isn't dangerous. It's democracy. Because they all share the same opinion, The View has lost its plot, and the script they are still reading from goes in the recycling bin, ideally right next to the cards they never needed. In that magnificent moment, Gutfeld and Maher agreed on one thing: even though they may never again sit at the same dinner table and may forever mock each other's political views.
And apparently they're throwing tariffs on manatee meat and bovine semen, which means The View is very unhappy. Oh.
But don't hold your breath, because the only thing louder than the applause for The View itself is the silence when someone actually challenges it. If you think this was the last time Gutfeld and Maher will light up that set from a distance, think again. These two may not be friends, but they found a common enemy, and let's just say that if The View ever wants to be taken seriously again, it might be time to invite some dissidents for substance as well as show. The View will not be sending them Christmas cards, because when the clowns begin to criticize the circus, you know that the show is in trouble. This is where it all comes full circle in the most poetic and tragic way possible. When the clowns begin to sound more serious than the circus, you know that the tent is about to collapse. We're not just talking about your average YouTuber or Twitter troll. We're talking about Greg Gutfeld, who literally makes a living on Fox News by being sarcastic, and Bill Maher, the king of eye-rolling liberals who once threw verbal insults at Republicans for breakfast. Nevertheless, both of these professional contrarians took one look at The View and said, "Yeah, that's too much." Take a moment to process.
Ah, you look tantalizing. You know, I make fun of The View a lot, but that's only because they keep talking. Because COVID also taught Sonny Hostin how to get her groceries delivered.
3 years, that's when I discovered Instacart, and I give them a big tip because they don't always pay their people well, and it's so that's been an issue, I think, for the company. But man, you can get toiletries, you can get fire logs.
Fire logs? She had to tell the audience that she tips big because even she knows she sounds it.
As one conservative comedian put it, The real problem that daytime show with coffee mugs and chaotic energy, that's not critique anymore, that's an intervention. It's the moment when you realize The View has wandered so far into its own echo chamber that even its ideological neighbors are throwing rocks at the glass walls. Another progressive firebrand that hosted politically incorrect content before canceling culture could spell its own name. You can tell that The View has managed to push out anyone with a functioning sense of irony or, heaven forbid, a spine. You either nod along with the manufactured outrage or get side-eyed into oblivion. The irony is that the guys who are calling them out, those who frequently live in the land of political minefields, sound more reasonable, balanced, and dare we say normal. These weren't enemies of the show initially, and Maher shared values with them. He was their foil, but even foils have their limits.
Goldberg, who, by the way, I hope is still a friend, we can disagree with each other, should not be canceled or put off her show, as much as I totally disagree with her crazy statement. Free speech. She should be there. She shouldn't get a timeout.
Not every single thing has to be for everybody.
Right.
We can have platforms that have stuff on them that not everyone on that platform or who consumes stuff on that platform enjoys. And The View is a particularly weird place to do a cancellation.
It's called The View.
It's called The View. It's not called The Facts.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that it's called, I mean, I don't think they meant this when Robert Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's The View.
The View has become the screech loud, disjointed, flailing for relevance, and about as insightful as a Reddit thread written in all caps. This is the last punch in a world where common sense is essentially on the endangered species list. It took a Fox host and a libertarian comic to say what everyone else was screaming into the void. Forget the typical parade of token guests and yes women if The View truly wants balance. Instead, invite Greg and Bill to co-host and place them next to the regular panel. Then live stream it like a therapy session with no resolution, allowing viewers to see the tension rise, eyebrows twitch, and moral superiority. The audience now does that, so save everyone the work and simply rebrand the entire thing and call it The Sigh. Alternatively, it could break like an iPhone screen after one drop. It turns out that someone had to be the clowns, and in some way, they made more sense than the entire circus. Sigh, cringe, and wonder when someone would eventually talk with any reason.